We're going to write a method called interleave. It's going to accept two array lists of type integers as its parameter. We're going to insert A2 into A1 at alternating indexes. If the lists are of unequal length, the remaining elements from A2 are going to be appended into A1. And same thing for A1. If A1 is longer, then we're just going to leave the elements where they are. That's pretty easy. For the second one, for A2 though, we can use like another for loop to add the rest into here. So we have an example. You can read over it if you like. It'll help when we code this out. I've already read through it, so let's start this out. We need an initial for loop. We're going to start it as when a is equal to 1, because at a is equal to 0, that's where our a1 is. And we're going to start off adding at index 1. So int a is equal to 1, and we want to run this as long as a is less than or a1 dot length. Or actually, this should be size for an array list. So we can go through the entire array size, and we're going to have a plus equals 2. And the reason why it's plus equals 2 and not just plus plus is because let's say we are at index 1 right here. We're going to want to go to index 3 next to add something, right? Because index 2 should be something from a1. So that's why we have to add by 2. Now we only actually need one line of code for this, so I'm going to not do any braces or anything. We need to have a check though in here, and this check is for if our a2 is it needs to be smaller than our a1 dot size. Otherwise, we are going to have some out of bounds because we're going to be continuously adding to indexes that don't exist. So what we can do is if we have to have a counter that compares this size that we're going to be comparing here for a2 to this a1 dot size. So let's make a counter. We'll do int, we'll call this a2 counter, and we'll set it equal to 0 initially. So it's going to get the 0th index of a2. So, and we're going to add this 0th index into here, and we'll increment it every single time. So if our a2 counter is less than our a2 dot size, that's good, because that means we can do an a1 dot add where we pass in at the index a, because remember we do it at whatever index this is moving along with, and then we have our a2 dot get where we pass in our a2 counter plus plus. Now that might have been confusing. That was a lot that we did there, so I'm going to explain it again at the end of this. But after this is done, we've added all these elements in here. Well, what happens if there's more elements in a2 that we haven't accounted for? Well, that's where this next for loop comes in. We're going to reuse our a2 counter, so we don't need to initialize anything there. We're going to want to run our a2 counter as long as it is less than our a2 dot size, and we'll just do a2 counter plus plus because we're going to eventually want to end this, and we're using our a2 counter here. So we are going to do a1 dot add where we pass in our a2 dot get where we get the index at our a2 counter. And that's pretty much it. In fact, we actually do not even need this brace right here because that's going to be it for this for loop. So let's submit and see if we pass tests. Oh, of course, we're going to need something like this. And we also need a closing parenthesis for our a1 dot add. I'm missing something right here. There we go. Put the semicolon in the wrong place. So we'll submit that and see if it passed all of our tests that we have. And it does. 8 out of 8 tests passed. So let's go over this now. We're taking two array lists as our parameter. We need this counter right here because this for loop, the header, is going through our a1. Now for a2, this is going to go through it. So this is going to keep track of what index we're going through. And this is going to keep track of what index we are going through for our a1. Now you might be able to kind of increment this together a little bit if you have your a2 counter be like a minus 1, but you don't need to worry about that. This one's easier. Make a whole nother variable for the counter here, while this header takes care of the counter going through our a1. Now, if our counter for our a2 is less than our a2 dot size, we can add it to our a1. And we're adding it at this specific index. And the reason for this entire if statement right here, the reason for this check, is because if our counter is greater than the size, we are going to need to come in here. Because if this counter, if it's greater than this, well, we're going to be adding things that we don't need to add, right? We want to stop this right here because A2 could be smaller than A1. Now, if A2 is bigger, that's totally fine. That's what this for loop is for, right? So this if statement is just making sure A2 if it's smaller ends, and this for loop is checking to make sure if we have anything left in our A2, we can still add it into our A1. If you do have any further questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'll answer them super quickly and make sure you understand it. And that's practice at 10.17 interleave.